Do you see me back at the podium on there? Can you hear me out of the laptop? Great. Do those headphones work? Do they work? Yeah. No.
Okay, good evening. Okay. Yeah, hot mics tonight. All right. Welcome to the RSU5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, February 28th, 2024. We are here at the Freeport High School Library, and we have a full board with the exception of Candy, who is out of town. So we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Do we have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes of the February 4th, 2024, February 14th, 2024 meetings as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Thank you, Carolyn and Danielle. All those in favor? Great, none opposed. Adjustments to the agenda?
I have one this evening under number 8, Superintendent's Report B. I have an additional resignation to announce, and those are all the adjustments.
All right, so we will move right along to number 6, Good News and Recognition, report from Phoebe.
Okay, so our winter sports have wrapped up, and congratulations to our boys Nordic team who got first place in state, and special congrats to Teo Steverling Horn who got first place out of all the boys, and congrats to all the other winter athletes on great seasons. And now that those have wrapped up, spring sports are just around the corner, which is super exciting. And another congratulations to FHS gym teacher and boys basketball coach, Mr. Tracy, who won Coach of the Year for basketball, which is awesome. For the arts, we have the one act play happening this weekend. And then next weekend, Freeport hosts the one act festival for a bunch of other schools in Maine, which is super exciting. We are also continuing to expand the relationship between FHS and Moore Street, with high school students continuing to provide community service at Moore Street, which is always super awesome. And then senior project proposals were due today. So seniors should have their plans and proposals all ready for their projects, which will start in April. So lots of fun things happening.
Thank you. So this weekend, the one acts are here for like public consumption. All right. Very cool.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 3 shows.
Great. All right. So we are up to public comment. So if we have anyone who would like to speak this evening, we just ask that you come up to the podium, give us your name, which town you live in, and comments are 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Snow, and I live in Freeport. My son Terrence is a junior at Freeport High, and he's been on the varsity golf team now for the last 3 years. The varsity golf team has been invited to attend the National High School Golf Championship in Frisco, Texas, which will be June 29th through July 4th. And the team has set a fundraising goal of $10,000 to cover registration, practice rounds, flights, ground transportation, housing, and other related expenses for the 5 varsity players and Coach Willette. There will also be 3 additional parent chaperones that will be on the trip, which will take care of themselves. Golf has grown immensely at Freeport High in the last 4 years. The team has more than tripled its players in the last 2 years. Last year, we were able to farm a full JV and varsity team, and the JV also played a full season schedule against other schools as well as the varsity. The varsity ended up Class B second for the state championship, and we were very proud of that. We have we're very excited about the golf team and what they've done this past year. We have a senior graduating going on to D1 school playing golf. We've also had several in the last 3 years, players go on to play in D3 golf. And that's all because of the support that we have gotten through the Freeport school and team. Golf is hard to fundraise for because it's basically 6 weeks and most of it's not when school is in session. We found out that we were going to the Invitational after the golf season ended. So MPA rules, the players can't fundraise till next summer. So the parents have, and the golf boosters, which I am co-chair of, have taken on some fundraisers, and we'd like to present one of the fundraisers for you tonight, just so you can see what it is and spread what we're doing. So we've partnered with the Maine based company and Freeport store, Seabags, and we've created a RSU5 Freeport bag. So it has the F on the front and it has the Falcons on the back. So we have the big medium-sized bag, as you can see, but then we've also have the wristlet. So the wristlet's the same with the F on the front and the Falcons on the back. So we are taking orders on them till April 1st. I've left some brochures in the back that you can order right online with the QR code and everything. These are great. They'll be in for Mother's Day. They'll be in for graduation, for your favorite teacher, for your favorite superintendent. They're here for everybody. And as you know, you can stick them in the washing machine and air dry, and they're perfect and they last for life. So we just like your support. We have a GoFundMe page, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Alicia. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Any other public comment? Yep.
I wrote down my comments so I can try to stick to my 3 minutes and not rant and go off on a tangent. My name is Janice Flynn. I'm a Freeport resident. I'm a homeowner. I'm also a taxpayer, property taxpayer. I'm a grandparent to an elementary school student, and I'm active in the community. As a homeowner right now, I pay $8,400 a year for my property taxes, $6,000 of which goes to RSU5. I feel as a citizen, I have absolutely no control of where that money is going. And right now it's going in directions that I never even imagined that it would go. I'd like to have a little more say. I try to follow the budget. I'm not an accountant, but I do try to follow your minutes and your agendas. I come to many meetings. I feel like as a taxpayer, the money that I'm putting to RSU5, which I'm happy to do, I have a grandson. I'll probably have more grandkids in school. I can't keep up with what's going on. I can't imagine parents can. I'm here specifically tonight to speak to Dr. Sellers' ask or outline the program that she's outlining for the mental health support for students, which I think is necessary. The program outlines those staff and programming from pre-K to 12th grade, if I read it correctly. And I'm not sure I follow the financial breadcrumbs, but it looks like the financial ask seems to be about $217,000 for fiscal year 24, which I don't know if it would be needed in 25. Also, it looks like it's asking for an additional $335,000 for special ed teachers, ed techs that go along with that. My opinion about this kind of comprehensive mental health program has no place in the public school system. More pressure is being put on the schools and the teachers to provide all of these services to the community families under the guise of free, appropriate public education. But everyone should have access to these services. Mental health is needed. Special ed is needed. It's needed in the community to try to put all of this stuff into the schools and have the teachers trying to keep track of this and the administrators and the taxpayers paying for it under the school budget. Doesn't really make sense. Parents shouldn't be forced to sacrifice their kids' academic education in order to keep track of what's going on with everyone's mental health. All of this stuff should be redirected. We should be able to put this under the municipal budget or someplace else so that we can understand where the dollars are going and we can focus our attention on mental health where it's needed. Schools should be providing a bridge to these services, not trying to put everything into the schools and sacrificing kids' academic education. That's what the academia is for. It's for academics. Freeport is now 34th in the nation in academics. Things aren't getting any better. Social emotional learning is not working in the school system. We need a component for mental health. It needs to not be in the school system. I don't want it paid for under my dollars going for RSU5. And I don't know how many parents really understand where their taxpayer dollars are going in terms of education. I'm going to send all my comments to the whole board so that they can read them. I just wish we would make a switch to putting cognitive behavioral therapies, mental health attention in the community where everyone can have access to it, and stop trying to force it into the school system and in the school day when kids need to be focused on academics and not on mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. All right. Any other public comments? Okay, we will continue with our agenda. Number 8, report from the superintendent.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to remind everyone that February 26th to March 1st is National Public Schools Week. This week, we celebrate the achievement of our schools, and we honor the significant contributions and accomplishments of our school staff and our school leaders. The goal of this week is to put the spotlight on public education and recognize the critical role schools have in preparing our children for their successful future. And I want to personally thank RSU5's dedicated staff and our administrative team for their tireless dedication to meet the needs of all children in RSU5. Also, March is Music in Our Schools Month. Announcement has been made from the National Association for Music Education. For nearly 40 years, March has been designated as Music in Our Schools Month. Music has a lasting positive impact in our lives. The positive impact on music in the lives of our students lasts a lifetime. Therefore, the education and cultivation of music in our youngest members of our society, our students, is paramount. Every day in our classrooms and rehearsal rooms across our district, music educators dedicate themselves to reaching all students with life-changing musical experiences. Parents, administrators, and the wider community often only see the wonderful results of our music performances. However, we miss the months and months of practices and rehearsals, and more importantly, the learning process that takes place to make it all happen. And I encourage members of our community to acknowledge and celebrate music education as an essential part of every student's educational journey. And on that note, I'd like to remind folks about upcoming performances in general. Again, as Phoebe mentioned, the one-act play Storm the Barn, March 1st and 2nd at 7 p.m. and March 3rd at 2 o'clock right in the FPAC, as well as the main drama festival at our high school. There'll be 9 schools participating. March 8th, it starts at 6. March 9th, there's at 1 o'clock and then 6 o'clock. Our kids will perform March 8th in the first slot. March 14th, DCS Staff and Student Talent Show, which is always a big favorite at 6 o'clock. March 18th, Freeport Middle School and Freeport High School Wind Ensemble Concert in the FPAC at 6:30. And on March 28th, we rounded out with PES Grade 4 and 5 musical, all great opportunities during the month where we celebrate music in our schools. Eric provided me some information today about sort of our winter athletics recap. Girls indoor track at the Class B state meet held at Bates College on February 19th. Our girls team finished 4th overall. Our girls 4x8 relay team were crowned state champions. The members of that team are Esther Penny, Ella Oshetsky, Josie Spalding, and Lila Hall. The team will compete at the New England Indoor Meet to be held on March 2nd at the Reggie Lewis Arena in Boston. Our boys indoor track, they finished 8th in the Class B state championship held the same day as the girls meet at the college. Reese Perry won the pole vault, making him a state championship with 13 feet 6 inches. I cannot possibly imagine on that skinny pole vaulting that far, but congratulations. Obviously not one of my forte for me. Alpine ski teams, both the girls and boys, compete in the state meet at Pleasant Mountain on the 14th and 15th of February. The boys finished third in Class A and our girls were second. Nordic skiing, and Phoebe mentioned that, they competed at the state competition in Farmington on the 19th and 20th. The girls were third overall. The boys are the Class B state champs, making it back-to-back championships for our ski teams. And I think we have a long history in Freeport of quite exceptional ski teams. Swimming, our swim teams competed at the Class B state meet at the University of Maine. Boys were competed on the 19th and finished 12th out of 20 teams, and our girls are on February 20th, finished 15th out of 20th. Our girls ice hockey team, our cooperative team with the Amish, finished the season 14-4 and the number one seed in Class A North. The girls beat Mount Ararat in the quarterfinals, then took on Winslow, beating them in the semifinals. And Penobscot, and that is a team that's a co-op team made up of student athletes in Brewer, Bangor, Old Town, Orono, and Hamden Academy. They beat them to the regional finals champion. In the state championship, our girls lost a hard-fought battle to Shepherd's. And our boys team, and remember we changed the cooperative with the boys of the team this year. The board enacted that so we could do that. They worked with Brunswick this year. They finished 6th seed with a record of 5-12-1. They played York in the quarterfinals, excuse me, last night and lost 4-3. Girls basketball finished 8-10. They were the 7th seed and they lost in the quarterfinals to Brunswick. And the boys finished 13-5 and were the 4th seed in Class A. And they beat Kennebunk in the quarterfinals to move on to the semifinals, where they lost to the number 1 seed, Greater Gloucester. Congratulations to all our student athletes and their dedicated coaches for a really incredible season. I think when you look at how our high school students and excel in sports overall, it is quite something. And I also want to thank Eric as our new AD, all his hard work, because of all the scheduling of games and everything that goes with it. It is quite ambitious. So I appreciate his hard work. And letter B, resignations. Jody Freeman, bus driver, on February 29th. And Rodney Richard, Ed Tech, Freeport Middle School, at the end of the school year. And that's my report this evening.
All right. And I actually think Reese is, I don't even think that's his top height. I think he's actually gone higher than that. And, his personal best, I think, is in the 14s. Like, it's incredible. That just sounds scary to me. So congratulations to all of them. I'm glad they're willing to do it. Okay, so we will move on to administrator reports, and we'll start with Kelly since she's at the mic.
Good evening. Included in your packet are the expenditures through January 31st of this fiscal year. As you can see, we're tracking a little ahead in the interest revenue area, and we will be making adjustments for that when you see the budget revenue proposal that it's coming to you at our next meeting. And as far as expenditures go, we are on track. We don't see any areas of concern at this time for the remainder of the school year.
Questions for Kelly? Thank you. All right, so we will move on, excuse me, to 9B, mental health support for students. Dr. June Sellers.
Right, good evening, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to give you all an overview of our system of supports for students' well-being and mental health. So I think I can see you all have some of the visuals that I provided to kind of conceptualize our tiers of support. The first page kind of gives you an idea of that continuum. We want to create environments that first are going to reduce risk that students might become dysregulated. We want to provide opportunities in that, classroom environment to ease any tensions that students might be feeling when they come in. We know that mental health is an important part of students' overall health and well-being. So those tier 1 supports, they include school and class, school-wide and classroom expectations for the pro-social behavior, how we treat each other, how we talk to each other. really creating that classroom culture. Culture meaning, how we feel when we're in that environment. Classroom climate also, how we feel and how we know we're going to respond to each other, to build that trusting relationship, not only with adults that are in the room, but also with students and among their peers. So again, the first thing we want to do is reduce risk. If a student comes in, we know that some students come in with, in varying emotional states. Some of them simply aren't ready to learn because of how they're feeling. So we want to make sure that we're able to address those issues, allow students to process if they need to process. But I think, some of the supports that we have in place really kind of provide that. And I'll go a little deeper into that. But just, this first visual that I have here kind of shows that continuum from risk reduction to prevention to that early intervention, tier 2 supports, targeted small group or one-on-one support for students. And that may happen in greater frequency throughout the week based on how a student's presenting emotionally. We have those tier 3 interventions, which are more individualized interventions. And then we do have some therapeutic supports available for students. And we'll get a little deeper into that as we go. But on that continuum, as students present with behavioral or emotional needs, we want to make sure that we're just increasing those supports and intensity, meaning maybe the number of times they're able to meet with an adult to process things, or in a social group to kind of have that interaction with peers. So more frequency, a greater duration in order for them to have time to process. So, and again, we try to, build in those supports, those, trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive principles into all those levels of support. And I've got on the bottom, it kind of describes tier 1, kind of operationalizes each of those tiers in terms of kind of what it looks like, what it's comprised of. And what maybe, sort of data and evidence we might use to determine that a student needs those greater levels of support. We certainly don't want to make assumptions. We want to assess. We want to make these decisions based on data and evidence of student need. Any questions about the tiers? And then we can go into kind of some specifics.
Maura.
Right. So the next one kind of shows.
Hold on. Sorry. Maura put it.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't get to the mic super fast. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Dr. Sellers.
Sure.
Mine's not as loud today. Could you talk a little bit about how students are identified for these supports?
So generally, it's how students present in the classroom. If a student, we have, and I think I've got some specifics. If you look on the second page, we've got those tier 1 universal supports. So we have responsive classroom is one of our tier 1 supports. So again, those are classroom structures, classroom routines, how we're going to interact with each other, respect agreements, how we're going to talk to each other. We've got, and it also mentions, we've got guidance units on bullying. We have student civil rights teams, mental health supports, and advisory. So kind of that mental health 101 in tier 1. So generally it's, responsive classroom. We want teachers who are responsive, who are, care about students and are, notice when a student is off. Responsive classroom has, that professional learning built in that helps teachers identify students. So in terms of like some specific measures at tier 1, we're really just, in terms of how students present, just responding to that young person and what they need in that moment. I think it also mentions our Bridges program. So I've got a page of definitions there. So our Bridges program has been a really excellent program that we've expanded this year to all our schools. Durham sort of set the model for that, and there were some similar structures at other schools. But we've really made an effort to just kind of expand that Bridges program K through 5 at all of our schools. So it provides a space for students to access that in the moment behavioral coaching. So it, you know, provides that opportunity to problem solve. It gives them that positive reinforcement of behavior, some self-regulation activities. They're in there with an adult who, you know, can provide sort of that predictable, you know, sort of shoulder and their, you know, their activities within that model. And it, you know, it just gives that student a chance if they need a break. Maybe they may need a more calm environment. Some students sort of need a, you know, an outlet, more of a, you know, a physical outlet. They need to talk, they need to process, they need to move, but it gives students that opportunity to do that. Sure, oh, absolutely.
I'm just curious if students identify themselves as wanting to go to a Bridges environment, or is it more teachers sending them in those moments?
So I think it's both. Sometimes it can be the teacher asking the student if they want to take a break, but we do have students that go there for both planned and unplanned breaks. And we have students that will request to go to Bridges when they sort of need that moment. So we're helping students kind of self-identify. You know, that's one thing we want to do is as we're helping them towards self-regulation, help them, you know, recognize their emotions, understand their emotions. You know, some students have a hard time even kind of labeling their emotions, how they're feeling. So it's sort of that process of recognizing, understand, labeling, and being able to sort of then explain how they're feeling, and then leading to self-regulation. So that's sort of a process of, you know, sort of self-actualization for students. That's what we're going for in the Bridges program.
And do you ever have students that could use it, but sort of see this as something that's almost not, I don't want to say punitive, but maybe like sets them apart as different, so they don't want to access the environment for that reason?
Yeah, you know, not to my knowledge. I'm sure there might be. I don't want to say there aren't students who are resistant. I'm sure there are, but I think, you know, our schools have created, you know, a very non-judgmental, really just, you know, just, I think the students understand that this is about their emotional well-being. I haven't heard that there's any sort of stigma or with, you know, taking that break. What we want to do is we really want to normalize, you know, being able to, you know, be aware of your mental health and be aware of your needs in the moment. So not to my knowledge. I think that'd be a great, you know, question for our teams, because we do meet periodically as a community of practice, right? Our Bridges staff that staff that program. I think that'd be a great question, because I don't think that's come up, but I think it's a great question to ask.
Kara.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sellers,
Sure.
for providing this to us. It's really helpful. I have a couple of questions about the cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, and who provides that, and the weekly check-ins. Are all three of those provided by the school counselor? And then my next question is about, I see it says that tier 2 and 3 have access to licensed clinical professional counselors and access to licensed clinical social workers. And I'm wondering if you could tell us more about who those people are and how accessible they really are.
Right. So most of our school counselors, and I don't have like all of their credentials in front of me, but most of our school counselors at each of our schools are licensed professional counselors. So they are able to provide certain levels of, I mean, not all of them are able to provide the cognitive behavioral therapy if they haven't been trained in it, but our LCSWs, our licensed clinical social workers, are definitely able to provide that. And our school psychologists are also able to provide that. They're also trained in that. They do spend a lot of time evaluating students, though, for eligibility for special education services. So that would be primarily our licensed clinical social workers that would be providing that. Was there another question in there?
Yeah, I think when it says access to licensed clinical, the LCPCs and LCSWs, if those are in-house, or if this means that you are helping them connect to outside.
Connect to outside,
Okay.
right? Some we do have in-house, but we are helping them connect to outside services.
And do you feel like those services are readily available, or are there long wait lists?
I don't feel like they're readily available enough
Okay.
based on the needs that we're seeing. For sure. For sure. And I've got some, I don't want to miss any questions, but I do have some data that I wanted to share also regarding students' mental health. But you can see on the second one, again, we've got some specifics in there. Are some of the supports that are available. I mentioned Bridges in Tier 2, that in the moment coaching, collaborative and proactive solutions is a concept that we use, helping, working together with students, kind of as the students dysregulate, we want to kind of co-regulate with them. And so adults are trained in being able to do that, and teaching a student how we can, work together to solve a problem. If there's a conflict, we want to work with students and teach them how to do that. We have social skills available. We do have check and connect, those weekly check-ins with students, identified students that kind of need that check-in with a trusted adult, just to see how they're doing. We have, for students who do have, more intensive behavioral and emotional needs, we do have Bridges kind of spans that continuum into Tier 2 and Tier 3. And we can, there are times when we do, have students that re-enter that might, maybe have had time out of school due to, kind of intensive behavioral dysregulation, and we have the student come back. Again, we're working on those collaborative and proactive solutions to help the student understand the behavior, how it was, not expected based on the social norms. And I think that's really a part of Tier 1, is kind of teaching those social norms and expectations. So a student kind of understands how their behavior, was not acceptable in terms of those agreements that we have in terms of how we're going to treat each other, how we're going to speak to each other. But what, that Tier 3 also, we could, have students come back with those safety plans, sometimes contracts, in terms of how, they're going to behave, how they're going to access that trusted adult, that one person they can go to if they feel like they're becoming dysregulated. We want to work with students, to the extent absolutely possible. We want to keep them in school because, we know when students, when they're having difficulty, we want to pull them closer, right? Not make sure they don't feel excluded, but find out the reason why, find out the meaning behind their behavior, and how we can help. So the one page has definitions. So because some of the things that were mentioned in here, responsive classroom kind of has a description of a responsive classroom, our student civil rights teams, just to kind of operationalize those levels of support that are in all those tiers. Like I said, I mean, we do have students that come to school, in an emotional state that's, where they're not ready to learn. We know, students' mental and emotional health, it affects how they think, how they feel, how they act. And it also plays a role in how they handle stress and relate to others and kind of make those healthy choices. So, like I said, I appreciate being able to give you an overview of our supports. We know, I just want to share some data according to the CDC. This was as of March 23. 1 in 6 U.S. children aged 2 to 8 years had a diagnosed mental health, behavioral, or developmental disorder, and that number is now estimated in 1 in 5 children. So recently, the CEO of Boston Children's Hospital, they made a pledge to invest in new staff and expand available mental health care for children. And the CEO stated, "We are in the midst of a children's mental health crisis, and it's clear that our system simply isn't working for children and families." And I think that certainly is felt. And in talking to families here, it certainly is felt here in Maine. There is just a lack of providers. There are long waiting lists for students to get needed care. So schools kind of have become very much of a Tier 1 in the global sense. in terms of mental health supports. So, you know, like I said, this is very important. There are a number of stressors in our environment. Our families are experiencing stress, and that, you know, some of that comes to school with students. So we want to make sure that we have the resources to create an environment. We want to engineer that environment to the greatest extent possible to be able to meet those needs, to be able to create classrooms, like I said, that are just engineered to help students manage stress, manage tension, provide them a place if they tend to be overstimulated, a place where they can be calm. If they need that sensory stimulation, if they kind of need that sensory diet, we want to provide opportunities for them to, you know, to be active and to, you know, sometimes they just need a physical outlet. So we want to make sure that we're providing those opportunities because it's, you know, emotions can be a cognitive disruption. And, you know, it just, you know, it impacts students' availability for learning. So we want to make sure that we have things in place to address that.
Thank you, Dr. Sellers,
Sure.
for that. I had a question, two questions actually. My first question is about the mind your mind. Reading that, I mean, obviously those are things I think that a lot of middle schoolers and high schoolers struggle with. And I noticed that your paper talks about how it's addressed at the Freeport Middle School and the Freeport High School. What about the Durham school, the middle school at Durham? What options would that be covered under there?
So I know at Durham, yeah, like I said, Durham was one of our sort of our pilot for the Bridges program. So they have just a wonderful, you know, system over there for addressing students' mental health needs. They have their school counselor. We have a very talented school counselor there, a talented social worker as well. And we do have, I think it's affiliated health services that comes in and provides some additional mental health supports for identified students. So I'm not sure exactly if Mind Your Minds is in place there. It is the middle school. It is at Mass Landing. But I can certainly find out.
My other question was, where the role, I guess, of the parent and the guardian in all of this? I'm assuming at some point, right, we're kind of updating parents as we're going along with where kids are at in this tier system and so forth.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the communication does go out to parents in terms of the supports available to students. You know, teachers routinely, you know, conferring with parents and, you know, updating them on student progress and, you know, their emotional well-being. But schools do apprise parents of, you know, those supports that their children need. Because we definitely want to include the family, and the family, I mean, this is all it's a system, right? So we want to include the family in those and that's part of collaborative and proactive solutions, is that we're really kind of, you know, looking at the whole child, but looking at their entire environment, meaning home and school, making sure that communication is in place.
I'm just kind of thinking about how a lot of times kids with these mental health struggles may look to less than ideal means of coping with their mental health issues, and maybe especially with the older kids in the high school and maybe some of the middle school kids. We know that we do struggle somewhat with drug use and vaping and that sort of thing. And so I'm just kind of curious in terms of that sort of piece of things, if there is some kind of way that this ties in with how we try to address how kids will cope with their issues in positive ways, and maybe, you know, help them if they do start to stray into these not appropriate ways of coping.
Right. So I think that's a great question. And I think it's definitely an identified need, and becoming a greater need as those kind of influences are out there. Many children do seek those ways to alleviate stress. And we do have, I know, you know, it's mentioned here in tier 2 and 3, we do have access to licensed alcohol and drug counselors. Our school nurses, I don't know if I mentioned them specifically, but our school nurses are definitely involved in these tiers as well. But we have, you know, we have our school counselors are well trained in recognizing signs of substance abuse. And again, that's part of what we want to do with our expanding our Bridges program, and in the supports that are in these tiers, is helping students identify ways that they can self-regulate and positive pro-social coping behaviors. But it is, I don't want to definitely recognize that is becoming more of an issue as students, and I think that could be an outcome of a lack of mental health supports. Like this, I appreciate you all are just so aware and so sensitive to the needs in terms of budget. This certainly isn't a time to be cutting school social workers. It's a time to make sure that we have, our school social workers in place, because when we want people to be able to recognize the signs and be able to help, children and young people find those ways to cope, again, to recognize their emotions, understand them, be able to label them, and be able to, regulate their own emotions in positive ways. But it's definitely a need. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dr. Sowers. This is extremely helpful. I was just wondering if there was a way that you could perhaps speak to the to parents of kids in RSU5 who perhaps are looking at this and saying to themselves, well, my child is not receiving any support in these areas, and my child's doing fine. So their sort of understanding would be, this is for other people, right? Mm-hmm. This is for other people's kids.
Sure.
Could you speak to how the structures that we have in place to meet the needs of the acute needs of individual students who either self-identify or the parents identify, mm-hmm. or the school identifies, has these needs? Could you just speak to how what we have in place to provide support to those students benefits the learning of all of the students in the classroom?
I think that's a great question. And I think, when it comes to, sort of a multi-tiered system of supports, which kind of sort of that concept has sort of come into being probably in the last really 10 years. And I think what it's all about is creating that classroom community, right? Having that tier one where students feel a sense of belonging. We have a variability of learners that come into any one of our classrooms on any given day. And that's true in our neighborhoods. It's true in our community. And I think that that classroom becomes that microcosm, of our larger community. And I think it's a part of just teaching that care for others. I think it's essential to democratic values, to civilized life, that we understand that, people present differently, people have different life experiences. And I think it's important that children learn how to have compassion, that children learn how to be kind, that children learn that even if they don't need help at this point in time, if they see that care and help is given to another individual, they'll know that maybe one day that it is something that they could need. And I just think, I don't know, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I think as a concept, this continuum is looking to make sure that the range of people that are in a society, that they all belong, that we want to make sure that they kind of understand how we're going to engage in each other. Because, I've worked with students, I've worked in, special schools with children who are wards of the state. And, sometimes it's hard to behave like a civilized person if you haven't met one. So I just think that that's really an essential element of our classrooms, is that we want to make sure that all children feel included, even if some come to school, not ready to learn. We want to get them there as quick as we can. I don't know, there's probably just a little bit of my philosophy in there too. So I don't know if that answered your question, but in terms of people who might be thinking, my child doesn't access this and they're doing pretty well. I think we're teaching kindness, we're teaching compassion, and we're teaching children how to care for others.
Mhm. No, I think that perspective is super helpful. I think also, just as I was looking at this, I think it seems to me that these supports, I suppose, directly and indirectly benefit everybody in the classroom. And because if there is if these supports were not in place and we did have students who were not arriving able to learn and were dysregulated, that's going to have an immediate impact. If I'm dysregulated, I'm going to be dysregulating her. I'm going to be dysregulating her as well,
Right.
Which reduces the entire classroom's capacity for achievement.
Sure. And this might be another presentation, but we could go back to 1876 when the common schools were formed, and the whole purpose of the whole purpose of the common schools, which was kind of exactly what I was just talking about. Global dominance, I don't think, was part of it back then. I think it was about community and about safety and about creating, a just society.
So can I just ask, on the backside is just the staff, service providers, and those are, because we have more than that from a social worker standpoint. These are the non-special ed support staff. Is that right? Or is this
Right.
everybody?
So you're talking about this right here. So these are the students, like instructional support is sort of my domain. So these are the student services staff. So these are our school counselors. You can see we have a school counselor, more at some schools. We have 2 school counselors at Durham, and I think that was an ask in last year's budget. Freeport High School, we have a number of school counselors, and then we have the social workers. So this does encompass, I think the one you have does include both, let me see here, panel.
And maybe because I know we've added some support in these areas in the last couple of budget cycles, and maybe we went from a half to a whole, so that's why excuse me, there's still sort of one listed per school.
So there is Moore Street and Mass Landing have a 0.5 that's shared, so they do have an additional, thank you for catching that, they do have an additional social worker who's part-time at Moore Street and part-time at Mass Landing.
Perfect. And then I just wanted to go back to Danielle's comment about the Mind Your Mind program.
Yes.
Is that delivered through the counselors?
It is.
Okay. I would love to know if that's in the Durham Middle School too, just given, excuse me, of course, as soon as I want to talk, the cough won't go away. Just given the information we've seen from the MIAS data, the middle school is such a key area.
Oh, yeah.
And this seems like a really well thought out program that I would love to see consistent across the district.
Yeah, I agree. Great feedback.
I have a question about the 3 school counselors in the high school. Are you able to give an idea of about how, like, the percentage that they're focused on academic support versus like mental health support?
Right. So I don't know that, but I think that's a great question, and I can certainly give you a follow-up on that.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I'm just curious if there's a formal process in place to kind of close a feedback loop in the case where there might be a crisis or a tragedy that happens in our schools, for us to incorporate lessons that we might have learned in that process into future programs or processes to keep those things from happening again.
So that's a great question. I think we've been pretty fortunate here at RSU5 that we haven't had, sort of a major, I don't know of a major crisis. I mean, we have had some, But we do, so that this group, the school social workers and the school counselors, so we meet 4 times a year as a community of practice. So, and we do look at, we have, students who are screened for, suicidal ideation. We do have, at times there are students who make threats against other students, and we certainly use our behavior threat assessment process to make sure whether that's just kind of a transient threat, a student was just kind of a little hot under the collar, or whether it's a substantial threat that we need to, to pay attention to and, provide that student with some support, additional supports. But that team does meet, and they, we do kind of talk about these issues that come up. And again, looking at our tiers, looking at that risk reduction, right? We want to look at ways that we can reduce the risk that these things might happen. How can we, be as sensitive as we possibly can to student needs, student behavioral change, really any change in behavior we want to be watching for. If we have a student that's usually exuberant and all of a sudden they're quiet, or a student who's generally very much of an introvert, but all of a sudden, they're, sort of, acting in a way that's been, that's not consistent with how they've acted. We want to look at that, but that team does meet. I don't know if that answers your question, but we do want to meet. We want to kind of talk about these things and how we might get ahead and in front of these issues.
You're like, I might right now. I'm going to try ahead. All right. Any other questions? I know we sort of jumped in the middle of your presentation. Were you good? That's okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you're good, I'm good. Absolutely. And I'll provide follow-up on those other items that you asked about.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right. So board comments and committee reports, board information exchange, agenda requests. If you guys would indulge me for a moment. So I have this in my folder every meeting. Jenny puts it in my folder. It's a gavel. A pretty amazing man made it for me when I became the chair 7 years ago. And I think he didn't know what kind of leader I was going to be. He made me 2. He made me a really big one. And he made me this one, a little more subtle. So he was a big believer in community service. And he's probably made hundreds of these, given to state senators and municipal officials. And he was an amazing man, and we lost him last week. So I've never had to use this in a meeting, but thank you, Donald. So thank you for that. Any other comments, committee reports? I know we have a couple on the agenda. But... All right. So we will move to finance. Beth.
Okay. Well, you can see in your minutes, we had a meeting. We were basically just reviewing the revised community budget brochure that will be mailed out to every household in the community, and went over a little bit of the budget. That was, I think, before Superintendent Scrappa's presentation. And then we also just, Mara reminded us about making sure to log the review of the cost sharing formula into the Finance Committee's annual work plan, which Kelly is on top of. So, and that was about it. If anybody has any questions. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So next is strategic communications, who I think,
So our last meeting on January 30th, we reviewed the budget brochure for, I believe, the last time. We looked at the reviewed changes that the Finance Committee suggested, and we're excited about the changes that have been made this year and looking forward to seeing that final and in the mail. And we also decided to do the parent satisfaction survey. We jumped right into that, made some changes, and that was distributed a few weeks ago, and the deadline was this past Sunday. And so looking forward to analyzing those results at our next meeting.
Kara, would you be open to hearing Michelle's thoughts now?
You guys all know what I think. Questions for strategic communications? All right, thank you. And policy, Colin.
Thanks very much. So I realized that this reporting out is the same as I did when we last word out, because we haven't had a policy meeting since then. So this will sound familiar. But we met on February 2nd via Zoom. A reminder that all of our policy meetings are open to the public to attend and watch us do our work. We looked at policy IMG, animals in schools, and we are bringing that back to committee for after gathering some information from different members of the administration. We also started to look at DGH, purchasing and contracting, procurement staff code of conduct, and we're going to be taking that back, looking at that together with a different policy called DJ, which is bidding and purchasing, because those two policies are linked. So we're going to be looking at those together, and then we will bring those to you as a pair in the future. We also spent some time looking at JHB, which is truancy, and that is requiring more attention as well. So we're bringing that back to committee. Again, our next meeting will be on March 8th at 8:45 a.m. by Zoom.
Questions for policy? Okay, thank you. So we don't have any policy to review tonight, though. So we will move on to unfinished business. 12A. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval of second read for the 24-25 school calendar? Cheyenne, thank you. Beth? I guess we can talk about it first. We're just going to vote. Cynthia's not here. So I don't believe there are any changes from the first read of this. So, the highlights for folks who weren't here for the first read is that based on how the calendar falls, we are back to a start date of after Labor Day. First day of school would be Tuesday, September 3rd. Not a lot of changes in terms of how the other things flow. I will point out, because I did get a question from one of the folks in the Durham town office to make sure that we were in fact closed on election day, because we vote in the school for large elections like a presidential election. So it's a PLD day, so staff is in the building, but there'll be no children. So I did tell her I would confirm that. So hopefully she's watching. Yeah.
We had talked about this briefly last time too, but I'm hoping that Cynthia can find a way to make November 5th a little more clear that it is no school for the children, but it is a half day for the staff. So when people see half there, they know that that's half for the staff, but no students, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and I'm wondering if that.
So if we can just put no students in parentheses there, just
somewhere. Yeah.
So under PLD, it says no students, but
yeah. So either maybe take that half off, or
but
so
it is a
that
half
isn't
day for the
for
staff.
the staff, yeah. So maybe just say half day for staff, or like something. It threw me off last year, even though maybe it shouldn't have. But looking at it again, I still had to really think about that.
I think that if you just look at PLD and know that that's no kids ever, right? PLD. If it's a PLD day, no kids.
The only time we have kids for part of the day and then PLD would be the early release days. So those are kids in the morning and then staff full day. We can ask her to try and make it a little more obvious, just so people understand that is in fact no kids in the building.
Yeah, I think it's just about the clarity of that, because I don't think functionally having that just say PLD instead of half PLD doesn't change anything in terms of what we're actually giving to the staff, but it does make the point clearer to the person who's the parent who has this on the refrigerator and they're trying to understand when their children are in school and when they're not.
All right. Any other comments or questions on the calendar? Now we can vote. All right. So we have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor? Great. None opposed. Thank you. All right. So we are throwing things at Beth. That's where we are. We are back to budget review, and we have a full slate of presentations tonight. So we will get started on those, and we will start with athletics. Eric.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. As I created this budget for the 24-25 school year, there was a couple of things I took into consideration, and those two are: one is to continue to fund middle school and high school sport teams equitable. And it's just important to inform you that each sport has different needs and different equipment, which also means different dollar amounts are associated with this. So, for example, and I'll use football as an example, is their equipment is a little bit more expensive as opposed to something that, say, like track and field, that has more uniforms and more implements that don't always match up, but those are the essential needs when we come to developing a budget, and how we can make sure that we have the essential needs for all of our student athletes who participate here in our school district. And also to continue to support the benefits of our middle and high school students involved in education-based athletics. And that's important to understand, is that we're teaching them on and off the fields as well as in the classroom. As I look at it, athletics and activities at the middle school and high school allows for student athletes to experience a learning environment that promotes safe, nurturing, and healthy activities outside the classroom. These activities are to be meaningful and student-centered learning that provides group goals, responsibility of yourself, and as a member of a team setting. The funding of these programs is based on support in providing adequate financial planning that will provide our student athletes with resources that will help them to grow in these activities. Our student athletes serve as partnership with our community and our youth program in many capacities, from role models, volunteers, coaches, instructors, and ambassadors for our athletic programs. As we continue to promote healthy student-centered athletics and activities in RSU5, we are creating school engagement, community connection, role models for our youth, by our older student athletes, and a sense of pride. Developing this falls in line with our financial responsibilities to provide resources to our program while maintaining an equitable, efficient, and sound budget that includes the community of RSU5. Also in this packet is I believe a copy of the participation numbers that we've had for both Freeport High School, Freeport Middle School, and Durham Community School. The only thing that's missing right now is the 23-24 spring numbers. Those will be coming out eventually. As you know, we're closing in on that. So it's good to see that our numbers are increasing. I know that there was a point where our numbers were kind of a little down, and that was because of COVID. So looking at this current budget, what was added, and I really appreciate this, and a lot of community members and student athletes appreciate the fact that we have a full-time athletic trainer, and that has been really helpful. Antonio Romano is our athletic trainer, and he's done a marvelous job working with our student athletes. It's nice to have somebody who's in the building and the student athletes can relate to. Also included last year was a JV golf coach, as well as a first team baseball coach. For this year, there there is no staffing adjustment. When I looked at the budget, we have a wide spectrum of sports and activities that seem to be really growing. And so we wanted to make sure that those continue to grow. Some of the significant increases of this coming budget is the first thing is our officials. Last year was the first year of a 3-year contract that all officials signed through the MPA. And these officials are very critical because, as you know, we have a shortage of officials in all of our sports. So last year was a big jump from the previous year to this year. Next year is a smaller increase, and that's reflected in our officials line. That's due just to the cost of living. Also, like everything else, the cost of equipment has gone up. Some of the things that we could buy for a couple years ago has kind of gone up, and that's just because of inflation. Another thing that we are a part of a league. For the high school, we're part of the Western Maine Conference, and for both Durham Community School and Freeport Middle School, we are part of the CCC. And these conferences help us to promote our athletics through paying the assigner's fee for our. There's an assigner who assigns officials, even though everyone thinks that I go out and hire them. I really don't. They're assigned to us. And also for league fees, these league fees cover special things like in our Western Maine Conference, we have a student leadership conference, and we have a citizenship banquet too, as well as league trophies and league awards that are given out. So that was the extent of how I looked at the budget. There are, there are things that, I looked at to make sure that we have the essential needs. And to continue to work with our coaching staff to make sure that we get those, as well as forecast what's ahead. And that's it's important, especially when you get down to the end of the fiscal year, that sometimes these companies are willing to work with you to get soccer balls, sometimes at a discount rate.
Thank you. I appreciate you going back to last year's and giving us the update on how they've impacted the program this year. I know it's a little tough because you weren't here last year, but we've talked about the trainer for several years, trying to do a halftime trainer and trying to contract trainer, and the fact that it's still the same name now as it was in August for the parents' fall meeting is fantastic. Antonio is great. So I think that was an investment that we needed to make as the programs continue to grow. So I appreciate you recognizing that. The other big one was the first team baseball. And this might be too early to ask because I know there's the baseball meeting is next week. But I know we put that in place because we knew there's a big group of ball players coming up from the middle school, both Durham and Freeport Middle from last year. Do you get the sense that there will be 3 teams worth?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I saw the numbers. Yeah,
Good.
definitely.
Great. Thank you. Questions for Eric? I love good discount soccer balls, so that's great.
Yeah, I do too.
I guess my other question for you, and obviously in your first year, there was a lot to hit the ground running with. The other thing around equipment and uniforms is sort of the rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one in place, or are you building that? Or
I am building that.
Yeah.
That's speaking with coaches and working with boosters as well as that, so that we have that moving forward.
Because we assume a certain amount for uniform replacements, and it's just that sets whose turn it is in the lineup, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. More.
Thank you so much. I was actually wondering about the swim team. I know it's been a couple of years since we added our own swim team, and just wondering how that's going.
That's going amazingly well. It's been nice for them that they have a place. Training at Bowdoin College has been very great. Tom Green has done an amazing job. Our numbers are increasing, and we are starting, or a parent group has started, a swim boosters club. So that's great to hear.
Any other questions for Eric? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we will move on to transportation with Jeremy.
Good evening. Thanks for coming tonight. The budgetary requests Transportation Department focus on ensuring students are transported to school and programming safely. Excuse me. Strategic Goal 4, RSU5, has well-developed and refined finance, human resources, facilities, transportation, food service systems to support learning of all students. Objectives: provide all students transportation that supports their participation in curricular and co-curricular programs, is directly aligned to our strategic goals. The request for a new school bus aligns with this objective. Staffing adjustments to budget FY24, none. Staffing adjustments to budget in FY25, reduction of 2 school year driving positions that have remained unfilled. We've been carrying 6. 1 new bus purchase, 3-year lease, $51,355 yearly. Purchase and repairs maintenance, $23,480.
So just to clarify, the 6, it's not that we have 6 bus drivers, it's that we have 6 vacant positions. We haven't filled in several years, so we're just going to reduce 2 of those
We
and
had
hope.
6, we reduced them by 2.
So we'll keep 4, in hopes that we can.
We've since had 2.
Hired?
No.
Oh.
Resign.
Hired. I want hired.
I do too. Definitely do. We're going to have to do something. I don't know what it is outside the box. Retention bonuses, hiring bonuses, something.
Yeah, Beth.
I know I probably have it in the document somewhere, but I'm just wondering if you can give me what the number is of the reduction of the 2 school year driving positions. Do we know? Kelly. Okay, Kelly's on it.
We do. Kelly has it in. It's in the handbook. She's grabbing that right now.
I was thinking it was somewhere. This is the handbook. I know. I'm going to find it at the same time.
It is $119,045.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's the second line from the bottom on the reductions page. Page 7 of the handout.
Maura. Thank you, Jeremy. So we currently have 8 vacant positions. Is that right? Then with
We
the
had
2
6, we reduced them by 2. Down to 4, and then we had 2 more, so we're back up.
so we're back up to the number of
Yes.
vacancies currently. Okay, so the currently funded bus driver positions is 8. Okay. I guess this is sort of bigger than a budget conversation, but I was sort of wondering about the impact of that and the amount of time. Like, I know we've had to change routes and things like that. The amount of time kids are on the bus, and if they're still able to get, the parents are still able to get them to school when we have to cancel routes, and how often that's happening.
It's happened once.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, and are the routes longer? I mean, I know that's probably, I don't know if you
The
can answer
average
that
is
often.
probably going to be an hour.
An hour, okay.
Which-
Is that up?
It is, especially when you get out into like Durham, where you're covering such a large area, and we've reduced the route in each town. Has dropped the route. 1 in Pownell, 1 in Freeport, 1 in Durham.
Okay. Okay. And do you have any thoughts about, I know you said creative outside
We
the
have
box
been
thinking.
talking about putting on a driver's course this summer.
Yeah. Mhm.
Trying to do something with that. So there have been conversations about it.
Okay. Yeah. Because
Advertising.
Yeah, because it just concerns me. I mean, I know it concerns all of us, and I know it really concerns you.
Really concerns me.
Just like wanting to make sure that you have the tools to be able to attract and retain bus drivers, because of how important that is to, the amount of time the kids are spending on the bus and all that. So
It's a daily challenge.
yeah, I'm sure it takes up a lot of your time. Yeah. Thank you.
and I'm going to toot Jeremy's horn for a minute because he won't do it himself, is that he has been amazingly creative and responsive to the needs. We've had folks that have been out injured or sick. We've had resignations. And I would say knock wood, we've kept the buses going. And the one time that we didn't, we still were able to send drivers back up and scoop up kids to the best of our ability. But I really know, I'm speaking to the public, like we're really in a crisis here for bus drivers. And if we have, multiple folks call out sick, we may indeed have to cancel a route. That is not something Jeremy wants to do or I want to do or any of us here. So we really, if there are folks out there who are interested in positions, we would love to hire you. And also sometimes it helps if there are parents that can transport their students to school, especially on those days. That is helpful. But I just want to thank you, Jeremy, publicly.
Thank you.
Colin.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. This is super helpful. This is a question, I suppose, for you and also for my friends here. How much in terms of you mentioned thinking creatively and looking at like retention bonuses or hiring bonuses. At what point, how much are we limited by the contract that we have in place for bus drivers in terms of what we're able to do to sweeten that deal?
Well, they are in a collective bargaining agreement, so we can't violate the CBA, and any sort of thing like that would have to be, board action, and then have to be agreement with the union as well. And that we also have to think about sometimes there are trickle down effects for other things, 'cause that if you do something for one, then other folks, where there are other areas of need, why didn't so that's just we have to think carefully about those kind of things. But we're throwing lots of things around right now on how we might be creative to get some other folks on board.
This is a question for Jeremy, but also Jean. If I know that in the past we've had, like you said, you were thinking about running a class over the summer, and I think that has been done in the past. And I'm just wondering if you could just say, so people that are listening, maybe what kind of supports we offer for people that are interested in becoming a bus driver. Is there anything that we can help them with?
We do have an in-house trainer, and it would be a class, and we have another trainer that we have that could take them out driving and follow them through the whole process, right down to when they go for their license.
Right. Are there fees associated with the licensing or anything like that?
I think there are some small fees. Yes.
Small fees. Okay. All right.
But we're paying for the class and
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yep.
So
Okay. So I guess that's what I wanted to know. Oh, the class is great. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
And I think part of the issue is people may or may not know like the time commitment. Once, if you had your license, like could you do it as a part-time gig? Like who's a great candidate for this?
You definitely can do it as a part-time gig. A full-time gig is what we really need, but yes, definitely 2 hours here and there, 4 hours.
Yep. Okay, great.
Every little bit helps.
That's right. Yep.
The one that I'm covering in Durham, sometimes I use 3 different people to get through the day.
Well, Kara.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what a typical day looks like for a driver, like for a full-time driver, what that looks like. I know it's not just a route in the morning or the afternoon. Like it could be.
It's also a pre-K run
Okay.
or a Region 10 run.
Okay.
There's multiple trips for field trips during the day.
Mhm. Okay.
That right now is lacking too because we're trying to cover routes. So our drivers that we have available for during the day stuff is struggling.
And sporting events as well. Right.
Field trips, yep.
Right. And how many days are you driving right now?
Me personally,
Right. How many days are you having to cover?
5 days a week.
5 days a week.
5
you
trips
are.
a day.
Still, I remember last year that was the case.
Yep.
Yeah. Then I have one other question about buses. How do we only lease buses, or how many do we own? Like how many are in the fleet, and what do we own and what are we leasing?
The fleet consists of 25, and we lease.
I think they're single dollar leases, right? Like, so we pay for them for 3 years and then we own them. I could have saved you the trip. Sorry, Kelly. Other questions for Jeremy? So we all have our marching orders. We are to go. Nobody can come back to the next meeting until they've found a candidate for Jeremy.
Even a
Or
van
two.
driver.
Yeah.
Or a van driver
Yep.
would be helpful too.
Yep. And there's no special licensing for that?
Not for a van driver.
I mean, you got to have a good driving record, I imagine. But
CHRC certificate to the state, stuff like that. But yep.
Yep. All right. We
Have a
know
good
what we
night.
need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. All right. So we will move on to 3 facilities with Glenn.
Good evening, everyone. So start out, the budgetary request for facilities department focuses on supporting infrastructure to provide safe learning environments for our staff and students. RSU5 has a well-developed and redefined finance, human resource, facilities, transportation, and food service systems to support the learning of all students, to ensure all staff and students have quality facilities to meet their needs. Any staffing adjustments for 2024, 2025, there's none. Some other significant requests for 2025 are the water and sewer increase. These are just going to be standard increases too. So like when I talk to the town, they're going up 3%. The snow removal contracts, the cost of materials for the sand and the salt is going up next year. The bleacher inspection, that's just not the bleachers itself. They also inspect the basketball hoops and all the equipment that are in the gyms. That cost is going up. The telephone, standard 3% increase, as well as heating fuel. Some of the 2025 proposed capital budgets here for the high school is to look at redoing the dim roof, to look at doing the single stall bathrooms. FPAC would like to do some painting and some carpet replacement there. Over at the middle school is the single stall bathrooms, parking lot extensions. We have on top of the leach field concern over in Pownell, we have a sewer line we need to get to. That also includes an abatement, asbestos floor tile underneath the carpet. And over at Durham, inside the modular, they have the popcorn ceiling that doesn't help with the echoing. So we put in there to have that removed and have a ceiling tile. So it'd be someone absorb some of the noise in the room. That total comes to $445,000. I'm waiting, Michelle. Go ahead, let her rip.
No, I was just going to remind folks that we have historically had that capital budget set at the $400,000 mark for as long as I can remember. So maybe 10 years, 11 years. So this year, we asked Glenn to look at it and say, geez, given the cost increases that have happened in the last 10 years, we were getting a lot less done for the same amount of dollars, now than we were then. So we asked him to come forward both to the facilities committee and also to the budget discussion with, a higher amount that he feels is appropriate. And I feel 445 is very, very reasonable given, what we know the cost of things have increased. Because the thing we have learned is that when we leave things and don't fix them and kick the can down the road, they just get exponentially more expensive. So I appreciate the work you've put into this. And I also appreciate you prioritizing, the needs that because I know single stall bathrooms were not on the agenda a year ago. But given all of the information we've gotten and heard, it's important to our communities to expand the access to those. So I appreciate them making it on here. So thank you for those.
Yeah.
Questions for Glenn? See, I was nice.
No, absolutely. You're always nice.
Colin's like, nope.
I played the fifth on that one. Thank you so much for this. This is super, super helpful. Just for the 3 single stall bathrooms in the FHS and FMS, are those additional or are those
No.
replacement?
Well, for here, yes. So at the high school, kind of looking at some tentative locations, that would be a complete install.
Mhm.
Talking to Ray over at the middle school, it would take a couple existing bathrooms and just refab those.
And refab them.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. My second question is just from previous episodes of this television show that we're all part of.
I was waiting for this.
We have this septic
We do?
concern.
We
yeah,
do.
in Pownell. That we, from my recollection, is around 400,000 is what we have.
It was yeah, it's around that.
that.
Yeah, the number fluctuates.
My rough math.
Yeah.
No,
It's
just as
not.
that, and I think everyone is forthright about this in the original presentation, is that effectively that would effectively wipe out.
Oh yeah.
The majority of these projects.
Absolutely would.
So I guess I'm just confirming that is true. Second, I think just to your point, Michelle, about kicking things down the pike. I mean, which of these things on here should we not kick down the pike? In other words,
all of them.
But I guess what I mean is that if we're not going to put $800,000 on the budget for capital projects for this next year, which no one's currently asking for,
right?
What really can we not afford?
Absolutely.
To cut? Because I guess I'm just I just don't know how to think about sort of like just Xing out all of the projects. I'm just saying or if that's just really what we need to do, or that's really what we're saying, unless we pony up an additional $400,000.
No, absolutely. So there's two things. So part of the first part to this is the energy audit. So I did have a conversation with the vendor, EMC, and all the data's in, and it's 75% completed. So they're working on putting that package together. So again, phasing in through the projects. So the first phase, I think I mentioned at the facility committee meeting, I'm a work my way from the outside in type of guy. So it would be my recommendation that we would tighten up the envelope of the building, and through some of the schools, there would be certainly benefits through doing a lighting project. So by doing that, and depending on what those savings are, that number alone would be able to hopefully afford us to be able to attend some of these other issues that are needed in the district, such as the PA system. There's one. And the second one would be over on the capital funds. I know there's some funds that we're not able to access because we'd have to put a warrant out. Is that correct? Okay.
I'm like, Kelly's got the answer behind you.
Right,
She's
yeah,
just
yeah. I'm like, where'd she go?
So really what it comes to is Glenn's the outside in. I'm just going to go straight for the middle, right? So right now, this year, FY 23-24, we have basically put a hold on the projects that were on the list from 23-24 that hadn't gotten done over the summer. And we're holding and reserving those funds and waiting to see if there's any part of the panel project that we can actually get done before 6:30 that we would expend those funds on in this year's fund, 23-24. The second part of the panel project, if you look on the back of it just happens to fall back of the handout, the February 7th handout that you have, where we talk about the reserve funds. The remainder of the panel septic replacement is anticipated to come out of the capital reserve fund. What Glenn's alluding to right now is, unfortunately, in the 23-24 year, we cannot tap into this capital reserve fund because we did not put a warrant article on authorizing us to spend out of the capital reserve fund in 23-24. So when you see the warrant for the annual budget meeting come back at you this year for this 24-25 meeting, we will have an article on there to expend from, and we are anticipating paying for the balance of the panel septic project out of the capital reserve fund, separate from what Glenn just identified to you as the $445,000 that revolves through the local budget each year for capital projects.
Way better job than I could have done. Way
So,
better.
so it's all, the expectation is that they will both get done. So the panel septic, which has to get done, there's really not a choice there. It's just a matter of how much it's going to cost. And then these items will be done through the local budget. Yeah.
Right. So that's helpful. And it was a team effort. It was a team effort there. But so I think what you also were alluding to is that these are the projects that we would be funding.
Correct.
It's the projects that we were supposed to be funding this year that remain at issue.
Right.
Those are the ones that we are
currently on hold.
That are currently on hold
Right.
and would not be done. Would effectively not be done, unless the energy audit.
Can I speak to that as
Yeah, go
well?
ahead.
As if you recall, one of our other requests is $125,000. We're hoping to add because we're hoping to get a COPS grant that with some funds. So all of those projects would be funded through, we get a COPS grant. We don't get the COPS grant. We still have that $125,000 that we budgeted, so we can still do some of those projects.
And that's also from a reserve account. So that's from undesignated fund balance into the reserve. So we can either use it as matching funds if we get the grant, or we can use it just as the straight 125 to pick up the stuff, or at least some of the stuff that we didn't get done this year.
Many moving parts.
It's all about the buckets.
My reading of the room is that there's a bunch of people that are very hopeful that that's going to work out. But there is a chance that next year when you come up here, we will be hearing the things that we were wanting to do this year that we could not do, and that those will be first on the list before any new things that we might add.
Yes, that is a very distinct possibility. Yes.
So do we have sort of that list of what we did sort of put on hold?
Yeah.
And
it's not in the packet. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, no, that's
provide
okay.
that. But
That's
yes, we do have that. Most of it's PA systems, to be honest with you, across. Some of the projects that we did do is like the shades, and we did do the doors. Did 3 sets of doors over at the middle school. So we did do some of those, but once we learned the situation in Pownell, everything else kind of came to a screeching halt. Because as we dug into it, no pun intended, it kept on growing. So we put those funds on hold.
And one other piece too, I'll add to that, is that we found, unfortunately, the Moore Street School phone system has been having, if you've been trying to call in and it rings and rings and you feel like no one's home, we're really there, but it's the phone system. So we have to replace the phone system. And if you replace the phone system, it's linked to the intercom. So the paging, so that has to be replaced too. So that we're using funds. We have to do that right now to make sure, certainly for safety and emergency purposes, that's up and running. So I know, Sam's working on that and with help for Glenn. So that's another thing. Sometimes we have our best intentions to do Project X, and then that certainly rose to the top.
It did.
Other questions for Glenn?
Thank you, Glenn. I just wanted to ask about our capital planning, our capital plan. And I know that the facilities committee is working on that right now. And periodically we have a chance to see like the 5-year plan and everything that's on the list and where that's falling. Is that something that's going to be coming to us at some point this year?
Absolutely. So we have the current plan, but with the energy audit, that may shift along with that, and that will work into our 5, 10, 20-year plan, so forth. Yep, absolutely. Who wants another tour?
I always want a
Perfect.
tour.
We got some takers. I love it. I love it. This time lunch will be included. I won't do like we did last time. Aaron, you got that? You got okay. Perfect. You got us. Right? I know, right? I know. That's why my wife does all the planning. I just want you to know that. I set the tables up. She does all the planning.
See, it always takes a team effort.
It does. Team effort.
All right. Any other questions for Glenn? Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Moving right along, we will move on to number 4, technology with Sam.
Sorry, give me a second here with the microphone.
It needs like your own.
Glenn just a little bit shorter than I am. All right.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? I'm new here, so I don't know if I should give an opening statement or what, but I think it's useful to kind of think about where we've been with regard to, school technology. And that's right. Say it with me, the COVID-19 pandemic. That's right. And as you are all aware, with the shortly after the pandemic came significant state and federal funds. And what has the expiration of those funds created? You got it, a fiscal cliff. So that represents the increase in my budget is represented or is primarily the result of that fiscal cliff, either through grant funds, through the learning management system grants that the DOE provided, or federal funds, ESSERF and CRF funds that were used to purchase devices. And as those devices start to age out, we are in a pickle. We have also proposed a transitioning an open technician role, which has been difficult to fill because it's a school year plus 20 role, to be a network and systems administrator. The purpose of that role is really to we have a significant need in terms of network, phones, security, involved with HVAC, paging and intercom, all of these systems, and we don't have it's one of those situations where it's like, whose responsibility is it? And everybody's going like this. Sometimes some of that stuff has lived under facilities. Places that I've been, I've helped manage a lot of it, but always with someone whose role that was a significant portion of their role that was their responsibility. So that is kind of the increase in that role. We've also seen the DOE has not yet said whether or not they're going to pay for school information system hosting. And then we have a couple situations where, the plan was to use devices for 3 years and we're using them for 4. The plan was to use devices for 4 years and we're using them for 5. And that's resulted in the need for licensing for mobile device management. So yeah, I can go. I don't want to, you've seen the paper, you've reviewed the paper, the sheet in front of you. I don't want to go through them one by one, but I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. And thank you for having me.
I just was wondering, it says device replacement. How many could you guesstimate that we need to replace?
Yeah. So, that device replacement represents a replacing the devices for the 8th grade. So through the MLTI program, we receive a certain amount of funding from the state if we can be used towards a device if we participate in the program. If we don't participate in the program, we don't get those funds some other time. We can't apply for them in a future year. It's just either we take the subsidized devices or we don't. And so that represents the local portion to purchase those devices outright for 8th grade. 8th grade, it's 8th grade plus a certain number of staff at the middle school.
So purchasing the new devices for the 8th graders, will they carry those same devices up through high school?
Typically we haven't done that for a number of reasons. I think we're getting closer to being able to do that just from like a logistical perspective and how the devices are set up building by building. But traditionally we haven't done that. We've just kind of kept them so they keep them when they're in one building. And then when they leave that building, they're going to get a different device when they go to the new building.
Okay. So like they'll have a new computer for 8th grade and then come to 9th grade and get an old computer from somebody else.
Hypothetically, although I have I don't want to spoiler alert for the FY26 budget, but hypothetically that could happen.
Right. No, that's okay. I'm just curious. Like, thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
I didn't have a question, but going
Oh,
back
sorry.
to earlier with the PA system and the phone. So was that for the technology department or was
Yes.
that for facilities?
Because
Because I know you were saying that there was a crossover.
It's shared, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those. It's one of those things that here has fallen under facilities. In most districts, it's moved under technology because it's kind of switched from being like there is a copper line running through the building, and that is what the phone is calling out. When you pick up a phone, that's what the phone is dialing out, and so you're much less likely to have. There's no real troubleshooting. It's either working or it's not, and you need to call the phone company or you don't. To where the modern systems that allow a greater deal of functionality are all network devices, and so asking a facilities director who doesn't have a background in networking or supporting network switches or anything like that doesn't necessarily make sense. So I think who owns what, I think we're working on it together. And then I think once there's so many levels, there's so much work that needs to be done in that realm that I kind of feel like when we get to a stasis point, we get to kind of like level ground, then we'll be figuring out, okay, where's repair money going to go for this? Where's professional services money going to go for this? But I think we're going to be looking at projects, year by year or grant by grant over time before we really even get to that point of having to make that decision. And I know Glenn has worked on some of that stuff in previous districts, and we've got a great working relationship on that. So
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yep.
Common stasis level ground. Good luck with that.
Yeah. It's we'll get there.
We're growing. Unfortunately, I mean, it's the the plus and the minus of a growing district, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, you gave us a little bit of a sneak peek at what we might be seeing for fiscal year 26. But I guess, are you, we're not really, I mean, I think the 8th grade computers, that's sort of clear. That's sort of, those are at the cliff of those devices need to be replaced immediately. But there's not anything on here that we really could move to the following year. I mean, like I'm just looking at Google Workspace or Lightspeed. It's like that just would not be just wouldn't be healthy for our.
So what we're out of the list of increases there, I can't really identify anything that would be like, okay, let's kind of bump this for a year. A lot of this stuff are either the cost of licensing for servers or cost of end user licensing, or hosting fees, or services that we're purchasing because we need attention in those areas. And so that's kind of the unfortunate truth of it.
So I'm curious. I feel like a lot of the COVID funds that we had, where we bought devices, were for the younger grades that didn't already have computers, right? I mean, we've been 6 to 12, 1-to-1, as long as I can remember.
Sure.
So, I mean, I know we had some older ones in the lower grades on carts and things like that. So we got every kid some kind of device, whether it was a laptop or an iPad. What are we doing with all of those now? Because I don't believe they're still 1-to-1 in the elementary grades.
They are.
They are. So every kid still has.
Outside of there are probably some edge cases, but yes, they are.
Okay. And do we need to is the plan that continues, and so we need to replace all of those in this cliff, or do we move back to a more normalized or historically normalized? Maybe it's not the right way.
Sure.
But historically, the middle school and up.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that kind of school districts everywhere are considering. And if you reduce our fleet size, you make my life easier. So I mean, so to a certain degree, it's sort of it's kind of I don't have a huge dog in that fight. It's a conversation we're having with the leadership team to kind of see, okay, where are we seeing these devices utilized? Where are we not? What could hypothetically could we support a 1-to-2 type of existence? I think where that sort of falls down is that or where that could potentially fall down is that where we wind up is that in, say K2, if a teacher wants to use technology and thinks that, a certain tool is going to be powerful for their students and have an impact on student learning, say they've got, 45 minutes set aside to do it. If an entire other group of students is logged into the cart of iPads, then they are either going to have to use their prep time to log all those kids out and log their kids in, or they're going to be trying to teach a 5-year-old how to log out of this service and then log into this service on their own. And so I think that's so right. Well, right. And so I think it is to a certain degree, it is a little bit of a I think when iPads were on carts, when Chromebooks were on carts, I think in certain grades they were getting utilized, and in other grades they just weren't, and they were just sitting there. And that's largely because, these devices are designed to be kind of personal devices to a student, and they're not made to be passed around. I mean, I don't know. I hand my I hand my daughter my wife's iPad, and all of a sudden she's like texting her friend's mom from the messages app on the iPad. And so it's like, so it's, and that's a funny anecdote, but also it is kind of illustrative of how these devices are designed. They're really designed to be used by a single user. Does that mean that we shouldn't entertain that? No, it doesn't. But I think it's kind of it is much closer to, because of the complications and because of, the level of facility with technology for our younger students. I think it's much closer to are we having students use technology in those grade levels, or are we not? That's more of the conversation than it is, should we continue one-to-one or not?
Thank you.
Yep.
I think in our little list that we create and talk about at the annual retreat in August, I'm going to recommend that this might be one we want to think about as a presentation for next year, is around sort of the use of technology in all the grade levels. Like, are they still being used at every grade level in every building, or is it sort of hit or miss? Because I think, that could be a big budget number.
Sure.
And we'd probably want to have had the conversation before it's
for sure. And it's smaller than you think, just because they're using the cheapest devices in the district at those grade levels. I'll also add that for state testing, it's kind of if we aren't one-to-one for NWA testing and state testing, I don't really know that we can complete it. For those grade levels, I think that would be really difficult to figure that out. I just don't know how we would do it. So I just want to mention that so that you've heard it.
Colin.
Yeah, I think this is that's a super helpful breakdown, and I think such a presentation sounds great, but it does seem like there's a question that lives more at the kind of curriculum and pedagogy level, that is both district wide, but also building by building, that either is currently happening. Either that conversation is actively occurring, or really needs to, before we could either have that presentation or be in any position, I think, to really say whether or not it'd be a good idea to continue, or what model would be smart to support.
It came up at the last A team, and then we had a late arrival and then vacation, and so we haven't talked about it as a group, but I think we're headed for those conversations in short order.
Yeah, I wouldn't envision this being, an only Sam show for the presentation. I think it's sort of a full leadership team discussion around what it looks like. Okay.
The incident IQ system, is that something that you've been using, and it's just an additional increase in the fee, or is that a new system?
That's a new system, and that is for help ticketing and inventory management. I would say our inventory, to the degree that we are that our inventory, that we have a good hold on the inventory here, it is sort of through like brute force and wrangling and spending a lot of time on it. So this is sort of designed to, this is a system that is designed for help tickets, for work orders, and for inventory management kind of across the board. And absent that, I think we're some of these conversations we're flying a little bit blind. Like I can say, you know, I know we have this many iPads that are this age, but that's based on what we bought. But is that based on how many of those were broken? How many of those, so on and so forth. So we don't have I would say we have a handle on it, but it is not, it's difficult to get a good picture of what we have in rotation kind of below 6th grade. As well as the classroom audiovisual stuff. We have minimal inventory records of that. Fortunately, it's all mounted to the ceiling. So no, but it's more, I think it's more representative of, you know, lower down, I have, you know, a phase projector replacement, and that's trying to increase that number is really the result of walking around and not looking at an inventory list, not looking at, you know, not actually being able to make those decisions with this is how many we had purchased in this time gap or whatever, and more just walking around and seeing the picture quality on teachers' whiteboards. So that's kind of that's the difficulty is we're hoping to use a system like this to help us make more informed decisions about all of this stuff as a whole.
Yeah, Colin.
Well, I'm just looking at that projector there. What is our, what do we do with all the things that we're replacing? Are those recycled, or are those, I know we have a presentation that we get, a disposal of property. Is that, but I don't remember seeing a disposal of property for a bunch of projectors and computers every year. So how does that work?
Yeah, generally it all gets recycled. We have certain members of the technology team are more have more pack rat tendencies than others. So so the there's I would say Durham has a significant portion of the district's non-functioning technology in various closets. Yeah, so generally it's done through it's properly recycled through an e-waste company. If there's anything that ever had student data on it, we typically we will either remove the hard drive, or the thing that I just started doing this summer was just, if it was an old enough computer, is just taking a drill and just putting it right through here, just to make it so that the hard drive wouldn't spin anymore. So yes, it is it's recycled. That's the long and the short of it.
It's like the equivalent of the box in my basement full of cords that don't go to anything.
Correct.
Because you never know when you
Drew and I had a conversation about those.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
As
Yeah.
well.
You're saying if we need like a Macintosh SE or whatever, we can just go over to Durham. Then it's probably
dig one out.
You might have one. Sorry, Drew.
Maura.
I think that's actually showing all of the increases together as so that yes, so that's not absent the 24,000 for to increase to a network administrator. Yep. They're not represented in this budget, as Gene spoke to earlier, where we have money set aside in capital reserve, in a reserve account, or that's the plan, to have that set aside in a reserve account to act as matching funds for the school violence prevention program grants. And then if we were to receive those, then we would kind of be tackling this whole hog. And if we don't receive those, then we would be doing as much as we can towards school safety, school security. So badging, PA, and intercom, depending on how that shakes out with the energy audit or various other options. So, yep.
In our siloed systems, like how to bring it back going, is there any progress in this budget toward addressing whatever that is?
Yeah, no, that's really part of that, or a big part of looking to hire a network and systems admin is represented by that. There's a certain learning curve when you come into a new job where you're just going to have to pick up new systems. You're going to have to pick up the way things are done here. But it's where it becomes very difficult is, when we've had an open position all school year, when you have an open position and each building has their own phone system, has their own PA and intercom system, such as it is, has their own camera system. And maybe those function like some of the other ones in other buildings, but maybe they don't. And so I think we really, I'll speak for my team. I think we've really felt the lack of a position, but we've also felt that as we're trying to evaluate these systems and see what's what, not having someone whose primary responsibility it is to help figure this stuff out, to help manage this stuff, has been challenging. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
7-second gap. You're good. You're free. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. So moving on to number 5, nutrition with Erin. Shout out to Erin, who always her staff come and cheer for her when she does her budget every year. Thank you guys.
Every year. And one of them's retired. But she works more now than she did. Well, thank you, though, for your service. Geez, Sam. So I thought about just coming to you tonight with an old boombox kind of propped here, and we're playing the audio from last year because I did review what I said to you last year, and it was eerily similar, including the numbers. But for those of you who weren't here for that last year or have blacked out, or like me, you can't remember like what you had for dinner, I'll just give you a quick recap. So as I reported in the fall, meal counts are up again about as much as this year as they were up last year over the previous year. So once again, looking at the numbers, we're feeling a little strain on the food and the labor budget in terms of total expenditures. But each and every day, my staff this year are pushing out 366 more meals per day than last year, which is like adding another mast landing and another Pownell, and every kid in that school is eating at least a meal a day at both schools. And that's just since last year. So the good news is with more meals come more subsidy reimbursements for each one we serve. But as Sam kind of alluded to, the COVID bucks have kind of dried up. And one of the things that dried up was an additional subsidy for every meal that we served. And it was significant. I think it was 45 cents per meal, which came out to about $103,000 in additional subsidies over what a normal reimbursement would be last year. So while our actual reimbursement amount per meal is down, I wasn't sure what to expect financially as we moved through this. But between our continued relationships with our vendors, our district partners, the Department of Education, we're continuing to make it better still. I'm a working director. I've got a truckload of hand tools and power tools in the back of my car, and those tools get moved to the front seat when I have a truckload of haddock that I pick up at the fish pier. We continue to increase our use of local produce. Now we're able to start using subsidy money to purchase local processed products. So that's been helpful. And all the while that we're doing that and serving more meals, we're figuring out ways to get them through the line quicker, to kind of bypass the infrastructure issues that are becoming apparent with the increase in the meal costs. And we've done all that this year with only the 11 additional man hours per week that I budgeted additionally over last year for this school year. So besides adjusting my basic budget lines as I do, kind of in line with enrollment, with participation, and in line with my top secret proprietary market factor analysis, labor is really the biggest change besides anything that's proportional to changes in enrollment or, average food costs. You do see a decrease in my overall ask from the local appropriation. I mean, all meals are now reimbursed at the free rate. I don't see that changing on the state level anytime soon unless something major happens. And in the meantime, I suspect it's probably going to happen on the federal level. So that's great news for all students. And as I mentioned, the additional reimbursement that we received last year is approximately the amount that I cut before we added a little bit more to get to the reductions that we ended up as a team coming up with. So I think it's time to try that. I think we've had enough of a couple years of relatively normal, operation to feel comfortable with reducing that amount. So if you have any questions specifically, happy to help.
Beth. So somehow with your magic, you've worked increasing hours and then a decrease of $100,000 in the budget.
Yeah. I mean, just in the last 2 years, I didn't bring the exact numbers as of today, but I think I reported them out at my department report. But it's somewhere around 30% increase just this year over last year in breakfast. And I think it was about 14, maybe 17% in lunches. That same increase happened the year before. So now we're actually, now we're in orders of magnitude. And again, I work the system. We get USDA foods. I've been getting more of those, getting some of those additional subsidies, and at this point in my professional career, being willing to just say, "Hey, can I have more money?" And a lot of times they say yes. And so I'm comfortable now that those processes that we have in place are solid enough that they can support reducing the local appropriation, and responsibly.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
dedication and your hard work. And obviously it pays off in
Thanks.
dollars as well as in people. So thank you.
Oh, my mic was still on. Thank you so much, Erin. Maybe I just heard you already answer this question about the cuts. Was that in the food cost, or I was just wondering from the original budget what the cuts were that you, after the team met? Am I seeing this correctly? That you cut back $100,000 from the initial request?
Yeah, what we're just requesting is 107,000 less than we have in the past.
Okay.
5 years probably for local support for the program.
Okay.
So that's money that's given to the program above and beyond the subsidy reimbursement that we get.
Okay. So it's not like you started off with some things that you wanted to get this year and then whittled them down or something
No,
like that. Okay.
no, not at all.
And I just have another question. I guess I'll ask, I'm wondering, like, thinking about the money for the nutrition program staying in the nutrition program, and what that would look like. Maybe that's a follow-up question for when we have other discussions. But I guess I'm just seeing this and thinking of our nutrition program is like those funds are kind of going to subsidize the rest of our budget. I mean, I know it's a relatively small amount compared to the full budget, but I'm also thinking about whether and what we could do if we kept that money within the nutrition program. Does that make sense?
I think it does. It's not coming back into the general.
Yeah.
No, because it's an enterprise fund, right? So we're
Right,
still
it's all
spending
staying
some money
within itself.
There could be a time where we don't have to subsidize any of it, right? So,
Sure.
and then it's just sort of like its own little standalone business running, it creates its own income, it pays its own expenses, and there's no impact to the taxpayer for that.
Okay.
But we're still at the point where we are sending some money
Some
that.
money, just $100,000 less in this year's budget request. Thank you.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, the choice of whether to locally subsidize a nutrition program ultimately can come down to two things. Either it's impossible to manage the program financially, which it had been.
That's what it was like before.
in the past because of a low free and reduced and therefore lowered reimbursement rate. Or it can be, as I think I said, maybe in my first department or budget report to the board, it can be a choice that the community makes to give more to the student body than what a federal subsidy can provide. So it's just a weird tipping point right now where it really feels like there is a vibe that the feds are realizing that there is a benefit to, to helping nutrition programs not fail all the time. But it would be, in my opinion, a bad idea to completely cut out any local support in anticipation of anything happening because we just don't know.
I'm certainly not, that's not my recommendation. If that's the way that sounded, that was not what I think we should do. But I guess I was just saying that it's not that the nutrition program isn't subsidizing other things in our budget.
It can't actually statutorily. It
Yeah.
can't.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Even if we wanted to take Erin's money, she says we can't have it. So Colin.
I've wanted to give you some of the money before, but it was just not legal.
Thank you for obeying the law. Just because it does seem that are seeing these red numbers on our budget is a rarer event. So I'm just curious, just for a parent or guardian who sees a reduction in our nutrition budget as it's articulated here, is there any impact that they're going to see in terms of what they're, I think I know the answer to this, but but just how would you explain that to the
I would just give the example that as meals became free for all students in the district, the quality of our meals did not go down. If we were providing free meals and they weren't good, kids would still not eat them. That's it, this is a scientific fact. This has been a long conversation about whether to reduce that local entitlement or local appropriation. And it just was never the right time. It was either COVID or then it was COVID and then it was cohorts and then post-COVID and then, free meals for all. And so it's just been a weird 5 years, probably 4 or 5 years. So no, it would not be, none of our administrative team would agree to it. I certainly wouldn't. I know Jean wouldn't, so we're good.
All right. Other questions for Erin? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 6, community programs. Peter.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank the group for once again putting me on the agenda immediately after the smartest person in the room. It always feels great.
She sets the agenda, obviously.
So first, the first thing I'd like to do is look back at last year's report for a moment and start with some exciting news that now spans 4 different calendar years and 3 of these reports that I've made to the board. And it has been an anxious couple of years on this project. And we got what we got the hard way, but this week we opened our Laugh and Learn Center at Mass Landing School. Yay. that was exactly the reaction that was it. We went live on Monday morning when the kiddos came back from February vacation, and it's so wonderful to have our own home, and the kids are just thrilled. It was fascinating to be in there with them and to see the same children playing with many of the same games and toys and activities that we had in the other locations, plus some. but they were going at it with a whole different energy, and this is just going to be a great place for us. So yeah, I'm so excited to finally be able to announce that, because I've been a little bit of a it's been a little bit of a well, sorry for the pun, I guess, but Peter and the Wolf kind of situation. A lot of crying wolf over the last couple of years, and in fact, there's at least one family who picking up their child before February vacation, picking them up at the end of the day, and one of our teachers said, "Yeah, well, when we come back, we'll be in the new building," and the dad's reaction was, "Yeah." So anyway, yes. Yeah, well, I sort of feel like we deserve that, but it wasn't through any fault of our own. But anyway, it's a great new building, and it's just going to keep getting better. So I'm really truly thrilled to announce that, and just to invite any of you who want to come and take a look at the center. I suppose it's probably okay to drop in and say hello, but if the board wanted to do a scheduled visit and let me know, we can get in there at a time that's good for the teachers and the children. But yeah, really, it's a really exciting step for us. But yeah, don't fret. I've got a report that is about this year also, and it's interesting coming to this meeting each year and talking about community programs, because as you know, the part of our expenditures that is funded by the taxpayers and the RSU5 communities is adult ed alone, and all of the other stuff that we do is self-sustaining through our program revenues. So I'm always torn a little bit to figure out exactly what I should be saying and what you all want to hear about our program. So I guess that's what the Q&A is for at the end. But the things I'll tell you, as you see in the papers you have in front of you, is that one of the greatest challenges that we passed over the last year is just the unpredictability of the adult multilingual learner population, the asylum seekers who were at the hotels in Freeport. And just like our classroom teachers and our principals and all the school-based teams had to deal with that uncertainty and an arrival and the ramping up of staffing and resources to meet that, and then the sudden departure and just uncertainty about how that's all going to go. We felt that in our own way also. We have a very small adult ed program, and I'm proud of the way over the last couple of years we've met the challenge of a much larger population, and yes, we've been able to meet those needs of the students, and that's really where a lot of our focus for adult ed has been over the last year. This was actually going to be the year where I came to this meeting and said, I think I need an increase in taxpayer funds for adult ed. It's been flat all of the years that I've been in this office, and we run through the money. We need it for sure, but we're able to survive and do well with the additional revenues that we can borrow from for the overages. But just literally the admin meeting that I was going to make that case, June was there with the news that the folks at the hotel at Casco Bay Inn were being moved south. So I scratched that off my list of things to talk about that day with my colleagues. So anyway, we're looking at some other good news from the program and from the office this year. We are right now fully staffed. We still could use a couple of hours a week for Laugh and Learn in aftercare, but we're able to cover that really easily with substitutes and with our own coordinator staff. But this year we hired 3 new coordinators, and finally, after more than a year and a half, I think, of looking, a permanent learning lab instructor who's teaching our high set learners. We're now working on our Camp Seaside staffing and teen treks for the summertime. And while I don't anticipate any new positions coming into the picture this year, I guess we'll wait and see. But if that were to occur, it would be on the adult ed side of things. And we've been able to sort of bridge the gap so far by hiring people on contract basis instead of full-on employees, so that the arrangement right up front is, you're with us until there's not a population to teach. So we've got some additional projects remaining. So as far as dollars and big ticket items for the coming year, we still have some projects ahead of us for the new building. The first couple of days that we've been in business this week, it's gone okay with the drop off and pickup times, with parents coming to the new center, but it does get in the way a little bit at 8:30 in the morning when the families arrive to drop off their children at Mass Landing School and the buses start coming in, and so it's a little bit messy. But the drivers and Jeremy at the head of that group has been really flexible with us and working with us. But we're looking at creating a drop-off loop there, which will cost a few dollars. We do still have some grant funds remaining that would be able to cover that. And then we also have the issue of getting some playground equipment that is our own. It's not the end of the world for our children to have to walk from the new building to the back playground at Mass Landing, but we'd like to have some space of our own there. So that's on the list as well. But it's been a good year in community programs. We're looking forward to some new programming on the recreation and enrichment side, particularly namely a rugby program for K through 5, 6 through 8, and also a high school club team. That's going to be happening this spring, an ultimate Frisbee youth program, and hopefully summer camp that's going to be happening this year. So it's always fun to have some new offerings and be able to engage kids in the outdoors in ways that maybe they haven't touched before. So I'm very excited about that. And Rocco Linehan is our new athletics coordinator in the office, who's leading the charge on those things. But so in the vein of I'm never really quite sure what it is you want to know about at this meeting, I'll open it to questions if you have any.
You started with what we wanted to know about, so thank you.
Okay, good. About Erin being the smartest one in the room.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously.
Yeah, good.
Just following that.
She was interested in that as well.
Yeah. Opening of Laugh and Learn building.
Yay.
Yeah. Questions for Peter? Well, you clearly did a great job.
All right. Hey, fantastic. All right. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. All right. Home stretch on budget review. This is the last one, right? We've gone through every department. All right. So back to the mic. Instructional
All right.
support.
Hello
with you.
again. I had a couple of addendums to my previous presentation. To your question, Colin, towards the end, I just wanted to add that kindness is awesome. So that's a piece that I wanted to add when it comes to providing those mental health supports for our children. I also wanted to say that the act that established the basis and need for public education was in 1647, not 1847. So since this is recorded, I just want to correct the record. It was called the Old State and Diluter Act. And that did lay out the foundation for public education in the common schools. So anyway, so on to budget for special education. I just want to harken back to kind of the end of our last sort of budget season when we did add an additional special education teacher for the 23-24 school year. So that's this school year to Mass Landing School to balance class sizes in our special ed resource classrooms, and provide a level of support for an increasing number of students with more significant needs at that school. So that increased number was due to some new student enrollments, if you recall, some students who were newly referred for special education services and found eligible, and that was in grades 3 through 5. At that time, there wasn't a budget impact because we did fund that teacher through the IDEA grant, which is our local entitlement. That teacher was able to provide specially designed instruction to students with a range of disabilities. So this year, like I said, that position was previously paid by our local entitlement grant funding. So in addition to, provide meeting student need, this funding change for this year, shifting that from the local entitlement grant to the local budget, does help ensure our maintenance of effort. So maintenance of effort, if just so you know, is the federal requirement for school districts to budget and spend at least the same amount of local or state and local funds for the education of children with disabilities on a year-to-year basis. So that additional special education teacher that just That's the budget impact, is that we're moving the cost of that teacher from the local entitlement grant to local funding. The other addition was for the 6 special ed technicians. So these are not new positions. These are positions that were also funded through our local entitlement grant. So again, these positions were previously paid by local entitlement. So in addition to student need, the funding change is because we're helping ensure that maintenance of effort and moving those positions into the local fund. So these are not new positions. These are positions that are already within our school system. So it's just moving those, moving the funding of those individuals. Any questions?
No, I wasn't going to talk about the reserve yet. My question was for the special ed technician. So, our local entitlement funding, is that based on kids that are identified as requiring services, or is that based on free and reduced lunch numbers, or what determines that?
So that allocation comes from, so it looks at percentage of students with disabilities to total enrollment. And there's a funding formula, but it's generally based on students who have been determined eligible for services. And then, kind of estimating, a number of students who may make it into that referral process, but that's where that allocation comes from. That's students who are identified for services.
So if it's based on students who are identified and our local entitlement is dropping, is it fair to say then that the number of students that are identified is dropping? So would we necessarily need 6? I'm just wondering, if are they just dropping the funding because they can and they want us to push more into the local, or
Well, they can.
Clearly they can.
They can. I mean, that is one reason that they can. I mean, those allocations can change based on that formula. It's never been a fully funded mandate,
right?
But I mean, if you want me to do a little more research into the change, I certainly can do that.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, because that's a big number for us to drop both the teacher and all of those ed techs out of local entitlement. And I know local entitlement kind of moves building to building, right? Like we're able to fund things based on the number of kids in that building that are identified. So I'm not sure if that's part of the challenge.
I want to make sure I understand. So we're not losing that funding. We're just required to, again, maintenance of effort, we're required to spend at least as much as we've spent in local entitlement funds. So that money, I mean, the allocations are different from year to year, but like that amount won't be subtracted and lost from our local entitlement. So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, but
can I jump in too, just one additional piece is that local entitlement, we pay for other things other than teachers or techs out of local entitlement. For example, if we have students who have out of district placements, we have allocated some of our local entitlement funding for that. So looking at, that's one thing we look at, like how many of students will we have in out of district placement? What are those costs might be? We want to make sure we have enough in local entitlement to cover some of that. So it's part of this, not that money's lower and we have to shift it, but it's also the needs, for example, out of district placement.
Yeah. So it allows us to reallocate those funds, like Jean said, for an out of district placement. We have some students who need some, very expensive special equipment. So we would be able to reallocate those funds for that. Contracted services, people to come in to provide, certain specific services that are needed by specific students based on their disability. So we'll be able to reallocate those funds. We wouldn't be losing those funds from the local entitlement.
Okay, so the amount we're getting for local entitlement hasn't changed.
No.
But what we're using it for. So what looks like to us is like it's going down by $335,000. We're just saying, no, we're going to use that $335,000 another way out of district. And but we still want to keep these positions because they're, necessary to the operation of the schools. And so in order to do that, we need to move it into the local budget.
Right.
Okay. So now I'll switch it to the reserve question. So you go for it.
Okay, all right. Um, so in looking at the the lovely spreadsheet that we have here,
The big budget book.
yes,
The 3B.
It's clear, it's clear that the 95,000 is going into the budget, but the 240,000 we are funding from reserves, and so it looks like it's less than the two. It's going down. So it's like sort of budget neutral. Is that correct?
I think based on how those reserve accounts have been structured.
So I guess my question, one, I might ask that we try to treat like the reserve things similarly across different presentations, just because like Glenn has money from the reserve that we didn't put on his sheet, right? To Colin's question of like, well, where's the money for PES? Whereas this one we do. So like how it's getting funded is a little bit different because of the setting up of the reserves. And this is sort of new to us this year, funding things through the reserve. But I guess my question about the reserve funds is I thought we were sort of putting the money into the reserve funds. If we needed them, we had access to it, right? But if we're saying we are definitely keeping these 6 positions, is the reserve the right place for that? And if we fund it through the reserve this year, then we got to just move it into the budget next year, right? Don't worry, Kelly's coming.
Yeah, I mean that would make sense. Hi.
So largely, as we have kind of been discussing all along, there's been several vacancies throughout the year. So even though these 6 positions aren't new, what has happened throughout the year is there's been at least 5 to 6 vacancies within the EdTech realm. And so, and Dr. Sellers did come forward initially, and this was part of the ask for the local budget. But because we've been able to manage with having various vacancies at various times, some all year long, some partial years, we felt that if we put it out in the reserve, it was a better place for it. Because one thing that Dr. Sellers does every year with her team is really looks at student needs and truly determines where all ed techs are going to be assigned, right? And so depending upon what needs are of students, that can fluctuate and change. So I do just want to correct one thing that was represented when we budgeted for these additional 6 ed techs. We did it out of local entitlement carryover funds. And what that is annually you get an award each year that Dr. Sellers writes an application for that has various projects within it. And the money that's left over at the end of the year out of the grant is called carryover. And Dr. Sellers can write carryover projects for them. And so these 6 ed techs weren't funded with current year local entitlement money. They were funded with carryover. Once you spend carryover disappears, correct? So we're not anticipating getting another. So this 240,000 was carryover funds. Once it's spent, it's gone. Dr. Sellers is not going to get the 240,000 in the new award. They are going to get the new award, and then they're going to write projects based on the new award. Superintendent mentioned to you that out-of-district placements are fully funded through local entitlement. And the intention, the way the budget is structured right now, they are also continuing to be funded through local entitlement next year. But we did put a little reserve in as well in the event that local entitlement can't handle the number that actually go out, because that again is based on a referral process, right? And there are students in the pipeline, and some are referred out and some stay in. Other projects, I can let Dr. Sellers talk about what other projects are in local entitlement, but I just wanted to clarify that these 6 ed techs, two components to it. One, we're funded with carryover. It is one-time money. It does go away. And it came as an initial request, and it would have been part of the total request. But as an administrative team, when we were trying to get down to a number, and we said, we've had these vacancies all year long, are these truly needed? Like, are we going to fill them day one? And I think we came to the decision that we wouldn't necessarily fill them day one until we actually assessed every student and where all the where the ed techs were needed throughout the district.
So instead of collecting $240,000 from the taxpayers out of the gate for positions we may or may not be able to fill, we said we would set aside a reserve out of undesignated fund balance, which is not, I mean, it is taxpayer money, but it's not new taxpayer money this year, right? And it doesn't go out in the referendum. And then we can access that to fill the needs as they become identified and we found a person to fill them.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay. Thank you. Colin. Thanks.
Yes, that is very helpful and clear. But it does, I guess, just linked with that though, it does seem that then over this next year, there's going to be an evaluation of whether those six positions will continue to exist or how many of them. But probably there's going to be, when you're here next year, there's going to be some collection of those that are going to be on this budget. It will be between 0 and 6. 0 and 12, -3.
Largely driven by student need. Yes. For sure. Much of Dr. Seller's budget is that.
All right. Other questions? We'll let you off easy.
All right.
Thank you. All right. So that is all of the budget presentations. Are you guys ready to vote on the budget? Everyone's brain's just as ready for that. Okay. So thank you. And our next board meeting, we'll talk about sort of deliberating about the budget as a whole and ask questions and tear it apart and put it back together. And so this was phase one, which was get through all of those presentations and understand kind of what is included in everybody's asks. And then we can kind of put it all together. One of the questions that was asked in finance today, which may be on other folks' minds, is, this is all the expenditure portion of the budget, but there are other pieces of the budget which include the subsidy and the other revenues and what does the taxation look like from a budget like this. And those will all be revealed at the next meeting. Yeah. So we can deliberate the full picture. Yes. Okay, so that's it for the budget for tonight. So we will move on to number 13, which is new business. I'm going to call it new great business. So do I have a motion? This is written not how we write motions. I move that the resolution entitled Resolution to Accept Stetson Scholarship Gift be approved in a form presented to this meeting, and that the secretary file an attested copy of said resolution with the minutes of this meeting. Do I have a motion? Kara and Beth, thank you. All right.
This is a good problem to have. To give you a little history of how we arrived here today. Sometime at the end of 2023, Jen Gulko received some communication from representatives from Bank of America about a trust fund that had some money that had been donated specifically to Freeport High School for scholarships for students. And oftentimes people donate scholarships, and so Jen dove into a little bit, and then she got Kelly involved and she got me involved. She said, I think this is a lot of money, which it is a lot of money. So we involved our attorneys at Drummond and Woodson. So that's why you see this very thorough resolution. But I want to tell you, it's basically it's from the Norman B. Stetson Trust. And the gentleman's name really is John Hancock. John Hancock, Senior VP Settlement Officer from Bank of America. And he said it's approximately $3.6 million that has been donated. Mr. Stetson, actually, he is deceased now. There's still a home in Freeport. He is a native of Freeport. He went to UMaine, got a BS in electrical engineering back in '62, and did some really amazing things with his life, including he and his partners founded a company known as Inframetrics, which is an innovative thermal imaging systems that included infrared cameras. That was his company. So this is an incredible gift to the current students and future students of Freeport High School that will go on to do great things in their career. There are many legal portions to this, as you can imagine. This is a sizable donation here that a gift that you're going to take some action, and we will vote. We're basically at this point, we're just receiving it. So the board will vote to receive it. And then there are other steps that will be taken after that, which will include I'll be working with the high school. They'll have to set up some parameters for what are those very specific criteria for students to receive those. In what was written, it was more just the money's there, but the specific criteria for who would be awarded, that was not there. So that's a piece of it. The next step is, obviously that's a lot of money, and how it will be managed. That's a future discussion of the board, not for tonight. Certainly it can be managed through the school district and the high school award scholarships, just like they would do for many others. It's just with this sum of money, there's a lot more management to be done. And the other possibility, as you know, there's the Freeport Foundation, Scholarship Foundation. Certainly that, there have been some folks conversations with that. Would they manage that money with some really strict stipulations, but because it came to us. So that's another conversation about how you want to manage that. And there are certainly benefits on each side and how to do that. But for this evening, this very lengthy resolution here is just to receive that very, very generous gift from Mr. Stetson.
Questions? Phoebe's hoping you can figure that criteria out. Got a little time. She'll give you a little time. All right. Yeah, I mean, this is extremely generous, and and certainly not anything anyone was expecting or knew about. So every now and again, really amazing things happen. So thank you to Mr. Stetson and his family for this.
Yeah, I'll just also say thank you. This is amazing. I think the only other point is, to your point, Jean, we're not discussing the sort of structure of how this will work, but I know that last year, perhaps the year before, from a sort of policy perspective, we were looking at the question of how in general are scholarships handled, and how is that communicated to both students and to parents and guardians. It just seems like as part of this conversation, we should revisit that larger conversation of exactly what is available, what scholarships are available currently through RSU5, and then what scholarships are available through the Freeport Foundation, just to have that clarity to go into this conversation, because I think that would be really necessary. But this is amazing. Thank you so much.
Questions, comments? So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Ready for a vote? All those in favor? All right, none opposed. If there were ever to be a vote where there was no opposed, other than, adjourning the meeting, that one would definitely be the one. Okay, so we don't have any personnel issues. I think we've lost our public comment in the back through the evening. So we will move on to number 16. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session as outlined in 1 MRSA section 4056A for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter? Thank you, Carolyn and Kara. All those in favor? Great. None opposed. So that will be the end of our video. I don't know if do we have another room?